What is up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin Bees. I am a certified personal trainer, a fitness nutrition specialist, and I spent 13 and a half years in multi-level marketing. Now I'm using my platform to expose unethical influencers, multi-level marketing tactics, manipulation, sketchy supplements, all of those things. So if you found my channel, welcome. I'm really glad that you're here. Today's video is going to be quite the deep dive. And honestly, we have so much to talk about. We're talking about the Let Them controversy, the new protein product Mel Robbins is promoting, and the timeline behind what looks like a rebrand and why transparency matters when you're selling anything connected to health. This is not about canceling anyone. This is a documentation video. I'm going to show you what was posted, when it was posted, and how the pieces line up. Everything is labeled as fact or opinion and kept inside my scope as a certified personal trainer and somebody that's studying nutrition. So grab a snack, grab your favorite drink. You already know I have mine. You're going to need it. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's start with some context. Mel Robbins is one of the biggest motivational speakers and self-help authors in the world. She is not a nutrition professional. She is not a dietitian, and she's not a supplement formulator. Her whole brand is built on mindset, habits, speaking, and simplifying concepts into bite-sized frameworks that people can apply to their lives. That matters because someone with a platform this large starts promoting a wellness product, especially something you put in your body. People deserve straight answers. Not because she is unintelligent and not because I think supplements are automatically bad, but because when you speak to millions of people, your influence can push a product into a level of trust that goes way beyond normal advertising. And to be very clear, I think she does behave like a grifter. That is my opinion. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments, of course. She has built a career around taking ideas like the 5-second rule and Let Them and turning them into books, turning them into talks and high-level coaching content. High level, in my opinion. There's nothing necessarily wrong with creating frameworks for people. The concern starts when those frameworks spark controversy or confusion about where they came from in the first place. When people are confused about the origin story, they want answers. Now she is publicly calling herself a co-founder of a protein supplement company. Once you attach yourself to a product people consume daily, the bar gets higher. Supplements are not neutral. People tend to rely on them. Do I agree with that? Not necessarily. They spend real money on them based on trust. And when the person promoting it has zero nutrition credentials, it's reasonable for consumers to expect clear information about her role, her involvement, and the timeline behind the product. And that's why we're here today. Not to psychoanalyze her, I'm not qualified to do that, but to look at the timeline, the marketing, the paper trail, and the decisions being made around a product connected to health. And to do that, we need to start where a lot of questions began, which is the Let Them situation. The Let Them conversation has been building for quite some time. And once you lay out the timeline, the inconsistencies become impossible to ignore. And again, this is not about proving plagiarism. This is about transparency, accuracy, and giving proper credit when your platform reaches millions of people. Let's break down what is actually documented. Cassie Phillips wrote a poem called Let Them in 2019. It quietly existed online until around 2022 when it went viral. The poem was everywhere. Pinterest, Instagram, quote pages, Facebook shares. It had already spread widely before Mel Robbins ever spoke publicly about a Let Them theory. This matters because it shows the concept was already established and circulating in the exact spaces Mel's audience lives in. Then on May 13th, 2023, Mel posted a video saying, she had just heard about something called the Let Them theory. Her exact positioning was, I just heard about this thing called the Let Them theory.
I just heard about this thing called the Let Them theory. I freaking love this.
I want to make it clear that in her video, she mentioned that she came across this, that she didn't create it. And I think that's important to point out. In her book, she writes that the entire let them idea came from an emotional moment during her son's prom night in 2023. According to the book, her daughter told her to relax and let them, and that's when the concept was born. This contradicts her own 2023 video where she said she learned about the concept from somebody else. Two different origin stories, neither acknowledging Cassie Phillips's viral poem, and I find that kind of interesting. When questioned by the New York Post, Mel gave a very definitive statement. She said she has never seen Cassie Phillips' poem, has never read it, and that her writing is not inspired by it. It's a hardline denial, but it sits next to a timeline where the poem absolutely existed and went crazy viral. Mel herself said she just heard about this theory in 2023, and then she published a book using the same name and emotional framing. You don't need to accuse anyone to notice that the timeline does not line up cleanly. On March 14th, 2025, creator Katya, if I butchered your name, I apologize, posted a clear summary on Threads pointing out the exact inconsistencies many readers have been discussing. She pointed out that Mel told her book readers one origin story, she told social media another, and she told the Post that she had no exposure to the original poem. And all of this exists alongside a documented viral piece of work named Let Them from years prior. Katya's summary captures the public confusion, in my opinion, perfectly. Some people have also noted that the tone and philosophy of Let Them echo the themes found in Maya Angelou's writing, particularly her guidance about letting people show you who they really are. This, in my opinion, is not evidence of plagiarism. It is evidence that the entire concept has a history far deeper than what Mel presents. This is not about proving intentional copying. This is about acknowledging multiple conflicting origin stories, understanding that a viral 2019 poem predates Mel's 2023 video, recognizing that the public deserves clarity when concepts are monetized into books, speaking tours, and product expansions, honoring the real creators when large platforms build brands on their work. When origin stories change depending on the platform, people naturally ask questions, and they should. And once those questions exist, people start watching for patterns in everything else that person sells. Now that we've gone through the Let Them timeline, I want to take a step back for a second and talk about some of the patterns. Again, this is not about diagnosing her personality. Again, I am not qualified to be doing any of that. This is about looking at how a public figure builds a business over time, because that context really matters once we get to the supplement. Mel Robbins has a very specific business model. She takes an idea, she breaks it into something simple and repeatable, and then builds a system around it. Books, talks, courses, appearances, merch, all orbiting around a core concept. A lot of speakers and a lot of creators do something similar. That part on its own, in my opinion, is not a problem. But when you build an empire on tidy frameworks, those frameworks need to have clean origin stories. People want to know where they came from, how they were developed, and whether the backstory lines up with what is being sold. If your whole business is explaining ideas in a way that feels extremely personal and relatable, your audience is absolutely going to start paying attention to whether the behind the scenes story matches the public one. The Let Them controversy did not create that pattern. It just made more people notice it. It opened the doors for conversations and how ideas are packaged, how they're monetized, and how the story around them is told. And once an audience notices friction in one area, they start looking at everything else through that same lens. Now we're in a brand new phase of her brand. This time, it's not a mindset concept or a motivational phrase. It's a protein supplement. Something you drink, something tied to your nutrition and your daily habits. You can guess how I'm feeling about this from my facial reaction there. When someone with zero nutrition credentials steps into the supplement space as a co-founder, people are naturally going to ask more questions, not because every supplement is evil and not because the concept of protein is controversial, but because the wellness world has a history of influencers attaching themselves to product with very little transparency. When you mix that with a previous fight over where a concept came from, people are gonna examine the next product even more closely. So this chapter is about acknowledging that people watch patterns for a reason. When one part of a very public brand raises questions, even if those questions are debated, audiences become cautious about everything else tied to that person. And that takes us straight into the part of the story that shifts from ideas to ingredients, the launch of Pure Genius Protein. Let's talk about protein, because this is where things move from mindset content to something that you are putting in your body. Pure Genius Protein is marketed as a quick, convenient protein shot with 23 grams of protein in a small serving. It's framed as easy, portable, and something that you can use when you're busy or don't feel like making a full shake or don't have time for a full meal. There's nothing wrong with the idea of protein. Protein is fantastic. Protein is necessary. I and we here on this channel are a very pro-protein channel, if you will. What makes this launch stand out is not the concept of a protein shot. It's the way that the product is being introduced. Mel Robbins has been very clear that she is a co-founder of this company. She has said that very thing in interviews, posted about it online, and the branding places her as part of the team behind the product. The way it's presented is as a brand new launch, a fresh idea, something created from the ground up with her help. There's nothing inherently wrong with launching a supplement. I will say though, if your Carfax does not check out, you might end up on my channel. People start supplement brands all the time. What makes this different is that this is the first time that Mel Robbins has attached her name and her reputation to something in the nutrition space. She has no nutrition degree, no dietetics training, no background in supplement formulation. Her platform is built on habits, motivation, and behavior, not nutrition science. When somebody with a really large platform walks into the wellness and supplement space with no training in that field, transparency becomes very important. Supplements are not like quotes that you share on Instagram. They're not productivity hacks. They are things people consume. Some people take protein every single day. Some people lean on it to support their health and their training. Some will buy whatever their favorite creator recommends because they trust that person. That is why clarity about involvement matters. When someone calls themselves a co-founder, most people assume early involvement, investment, decisions about the formula, or even helping build the company from the beginning. Behind the scenes, co-founder can mean very different things. It can be day one, or it can mean someone was brought in later for visibility, branding, and reach. Both are legal, both absolutely happen. Consumers just deserve to know which version they're dealing with. From the outside, the Pure Genius launch looks like a new company with Mel Robbins as a key face of the brand. New protein shot, new story, new origin, and that's how it's being sold. But there's one problem. There is a timeline, and there is evidence that a very similar product already existed under a different name with different faces attached to it. When you put those pieces next to one another, the narrative starts to look less like a brand new creation and more like a rebrand with a new public partner. So now we're going to move into the part of this video where we look at receipts, archives, and case filings. Let's talk about Genius Shot. This chapter is going to tell us whether Pure Genius Protein is actually a brand new product or something that existed before with a different name. And this is where the timeline gets really interesting. Genius Shot was a protein shot that existed months before Pure Genius Protein was even announced. The products look similar. The serving size is similar. The macros, you guessed it, similar. Even the flavor descriptions line up almost exactly. Genius Shot had its own branding, its own website, and its own Instagram. It was already being sold, already being promoted, and already had public-facing founders attached to it. And this isn't just based on archived posts. According to a January 2026 article from Stacked, the original Genius Shot protein drink was created by Dr. Mike of Renaissance Periodization, that's his YouTube channel, and a co-founder. I can't pronounce this last name. I don't don't want to butcher it, so I'm going to have Ava put it on the screen here for all of us. Quoting this article, Genius Shot has now been transformed into Pure Genius Protein. The article states that the old geniusshot.com domain now forwards directly to Pure Genius Protein, and the original Instagram account points to the new page. Those are objective redirect footprints that show movement from one brand to another. There's also a public legal footprint confirming that Genius Shot was a fully operational business long before the Pure Genius launch. In April 2025, Worldwide Sport Nutritional Supplements Inc. filed a federal trademark lawsuit against Genius Shot OpCo LLC, naming the company and its founders, including Dr. Mike and his co-founder. The case remained active for several months before being voluntarily dismissed with prejudice in July of 2025. This lawsuit does not imply any kind of wrongdoing, but it proves something incredibly important. Genius Shot existed as a real functioning company with filings, ownership, trademarks, and public business activity nearly a full year before Mel Robbins ever announced she was co-founding Pure Genius Protein. It anchors the existence of Genius Shot firmly in this timeline. So the idea of an ultra-concentrated protein shot is nothing new. It didn't suddenly appear the moment Mel Robbins introduced Pure Genius Protein. This format already existed, the product already existed, and it had its own marketing trail long before Mel ever announced she was a co-founder. This is where the receipts start stacking up. If you go to the old Genius Shot website, it doesn't show Genius Shot anymore. It actually forwards directly to Pure Genius Protein. That's not speculation. That is a domain redirect. It is a verifiable digital footprint yet again. And the Genius Shot Instagram literally says it's moved and now belongs to Pure Genius Protein. When a product, a website, and a social media handle all move in the same direction, it usually means one of two things. Either the company rebranded or the company was acquired. Both happen in the wellness space and in companies in general all the time. What matters here is that the product being sold today is not being marketed as a rebrand. It is being marketed as a new creation, as something that was co-founded and launched fresh with Mel Robbins. And unfortunately, that is not what the digital trail shows. So the next question we have to answer is, who was actually attached to Genius Shot when it first launched? Now that we know Genius Shot predated Pure Genius Protein, let's look at who was publicly connected to it. During its original run, Genius Shot had founders and front-facing promoters, and one of the most visible names to it was Dr. Mike. Here is where the timeline is really important. Dr. Mike posted about Genius Shot on March 15th, 2025. In that post, he talked about the product in a way that made it sound like he helped develop it. He described the formulation and the purpose behind the shot the way somebody does when they're involved in creation, not just sponsorship. That is almost a full year before Mel's January 5th, 2026 reel, where she told her audience she had been working on Pure Genius for about a year and that it was a secret she had been keeping. So we have Dr. Mike publicly discussing Genius Shot in early 2025, and Mel later saying that she spent a year creating what appears to be essentially the same product. Two different timelines, yet again, two public claims, and they don't line up at all. Now, I'm not calling anybody a liar. I'm just simply comparing dates and looking at the digital footprint. Before we go any further, I feel like it's important to ask a basic question. Why is Mel Robbins getting involved with a protein product at all? This is completely outside of her expertise. She has no training in nutrition. I've said it multiple times in this video. I'm going to say it again. No background in supplement formulation. Her entire brand is built on behavior and mindset. This is a weird pivot for her, in my opinion. So what led to this leap in protein shots? Did she hear a podcast where people talked about protein and decided to jump in? Was she interviewing people that were talking about protein? Was she approached by an existing company? Was the product already developed and in need of a new public face? There has been zero explanation as to why this has been happening, which leads to another question people are understandably asking. Is this company trying to move away from Dr. Mike because of the public criticism around his dissertation after Solomon Nelson's videos? If that's what happened, it would have made way more sense to say that there was a change in leadership or direction That would have made sense. Instead, what we see is a quiet rebrand, a new front person, and marketing that presents the product as if it's being created for the first time. In my opinion, doing a silent rebrand while selling it as a fresh creation feels less like transparency and more like trying to outrun controversy. Once you put together the lawsuit, the domain redirects, the Instagram handoff, Dr. Mike's early involvement, and Mel's later claims, the picture looks less like two separate companies and more like one product going through a controlled transition. This is also where credibility in the supplement space becomes really important. Dr. Mike has a background in exercise science, and that's often been used to support supplement marketing. Mel Robbins, yet again, does not share that same kind of background. Again, no nutrition credentials, no formulation training, etc., etc. No track record in the supplement industry at all. When a brand shifts from being tied to somebody with scientific training to someone known for motivational speaking, the need for clear communication increases, in my opinion. That doesn't mean that Mel is not allowed to be involved in something like this, and it doesn't automatically mean that she did something necessarily wrong. It means the brand moved from a science-branded figure to someone whose expertise is in a totally different space. Consumers deserve clarity around this. They deserve to know who actually created the product, who designed the formula, and why the face of the brand changed. When you put all of this together, the story looks less like two unrelated companies and more like one product that went through a quiet makeover. Genius Shot already existed. It had founders, it had a promotion plan, it had a full identity, and then it faded away. The digital doors redirected, and now we have Pure Genius Protein showing up with that same footprint, but it's a new story and a very different main character. It's odd. Now, that doesn't mean something illegal happened by any means. It does not prove that Mel was never involved. It does show that the narrative of brand new launch doesn't match the digital evidence. And when a company is selling something people drink and consume, that mismatch is a problem. Now that we've looked at the Genius Shot era and the shift into Pure Genius Protein, we can compare the two products side by side because the overlap is going to have you shocked. I'm going to walk through the similarities between Genius Shot and Pure Genius Shot so that you can see why so many people are questioning the idea that this is brand new. First, the format. Genius Shot was marketed as a small concentrated protein shot with a high amount of protein in a very small serving. Pure Genius Protein is marketed the exact same way. Same category, same delivery method, same selling point. The overall format is identical. This matters because protein shots are a very niche category. Most protein products are powders, ready-to-drink shakes, or even carbonated beverages. Concentrated 3 to 4 ounce protein shots are much more rare. So when two brands show up with that same niche format close together in time, people pay attention. And also, wouldn't there be lawsuits if these were two different companies? You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Now let's talk about the macros. Genius Shot offered 23 grams of protein in roughly a 3-ounce shot. Pure Genius Protein offers 23 grams of protein in a 3-ounce shot. Same serving size, same protein amount, same high protein in a tiny bottle storyline. Products can resemble each other without being the same, but when the serving size and the protein content are identical, that's a strong hint that maybe we're not looking at two unrelated inventions. Now, the flavors. Genius Shot promoted options like chocolate brownie, vanilla caramel, and other dessert-style flavors. Pure Genius Protein is now promoting almost identical profiles. The theme, the vibe, and even parts of the descriptive language are very similar. You can rename a product or tweak a formula, but flavor trails are one of the easiest ways to see that one product identity slid into another. Let's talk about the packaging. Genius Shot came in a small bottle with minimal labeling and a bold flavor name. Pure Genius Protein uses the same kind of bottle, the same minimal design style, and the same concentrated shot look. Even the way the protein grams are highlighted on the label is strikingly similar. Packaging on its own doesn't prove two products are the same, but combined with the format, the macros, the overlapping flavors, and the timeline, it becomes one more sign that this is a product line that evolved, not something invented from scratch. Matching packaging is very common in rebrands. It's not automatically shady. It's just another puzzle piece, and we are looking at the entire picture here. Finally, let's talk about the timing. Genius Shot was being actively promoted months before Pure Genius Protein was announced. They had content, identity, and a very clear presence on social media. Then, Genius Shot all of a sudden went quiet. The website started forwarding, the Instagram account moved. Almost immediately after that, Pure Genius Protein appeared with Mel Robbins front and center in the marketing. The timing is not subtle by any means. One brand faded and another one emerged carrying the same product DNA. You don't have to be an investigator to see the connection here. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented sequence of events that we are going through here. When you put all of this together, the side-by-side comparison, the digital footprint, the flavor overlap, the matching serving size, and the transition in branding, the picture is pretty clear, I think. Pure Genius Protein is not a totally new idea. It looks like the continuation or the evolution, if you will, of something that has already been on the market. And honestly, that would not be a problem if it had been communicated openly. Rebrands happen all the time. New partnerships happen all the time. Buyouts and acquisitions happen all the time. The part that is frustrating is presenting this as a brand new creation while pretending the older version never existed. That disconnect is fueling a lot of the discussion, especially on top of Mel's lack of nutrition credentials. Now that we have established the product connection, I think it's time to talk about the other pieces that shape how people see this entire thing, the co-founder claims and how they line up with a timeline. Let's talk about the story being told publicly around this product and how it came to be. This is where the marketing and the timeline really do clash. Mel Robbins has repeatedly said that she's a co-founder of Pure Genius Protein. She has said that in interviews, in launch posts, and in a reel on January 5th, 2026, where she told her audience she had been working on the product for a full year. She framed it as a secret that she'd been keeping and something she actively helped create. When you lay that next to the actual timeline, it doesn't fit. Period. Genius Shot was already being promoted on Instagram back on March 15th, 2025 through May of that same year. In that post, Dr. Mike talked about the product in a way that suggested he was involved in the development. That content existed long before Mel claimed a year of development and something being pitched as brand new. There are explanations that could absolutely exist behind the scenes. Mel could have joined the company during a rebrand. She could have come on as a co-founding partner for the relaunch. She could have invested or helped steer the new version. All of these things happen in the supplement world. The problem is that none of that is being explained. The marketing does not mention a rebrand, an acquisition, or even a transition. It frames Pure Genius Protein as if it were built from the ground up, brand new, with Mel at the center. That leads to another fair question people are asking. Is this company trying to step away from Dr. Mike and the criticism, like I've mentioned earlier, around his dissertation? That would make sense to me. And if that is part of the story, saying that there was a leadership shift or a new strategy would have been much more honest from this brand. Instead, they quietly change names, redirect the website, move their Instagram profile, and tells a launch story that acts like this is a completely new product. I'm not saying rebrands are wrong. I am saying that leaving out that context feels extremely misleading. When a product that already existed suddenly shows up with a different label, a different public face, and a brand new origin story, people notice, people start asking questions, especially when the older version is still visible in the archive. I was able to find all of this very easily online. This also circles back to that earlier question. Why is Mel Robbins in the protein business at all? It is so far outside of her lane. We already talked about what her focus is for her brand. So where did the sudden urge to co-found a protein shot even come from? We have no idea because it hasn't been explained. When people hear the term co-founder, they usually assume deep involvement. They assume creation, investment, decision-making, early development, behind the scenes. Co-founder can mean so many different things. It can mean someone was there from day one, or it can mean that they joined later and helped shape or reshape the relaunch, something that already existed. Again, both are legal, both happen, but the difference matters if your entire pitch rests on the story of how you built something. When the public story says brand new and the receipts say this already existed, people are going to compare dates. It is very easy to do that. And suddenly, the story of Pure Genius being created from scratch looks a lot more like a second version of Genius Shot. And in my opinion, this is the exact type of behavior that makes people call her a grifter. When someone presents a rebrand as a brand new creation, calls themselves a co-founder on a product that already existed, and does not offer any clear explanation of their role or qualification, it raises very real questions about credibility and intent, especially when that product is something people are consuming. All of this suggests that the narrative being sold to the public is incomplete. And when a product is connected to health, incomplete stories are not good enough. People shouldn't have to dig through lawsuit dockets and redirect trails to understand what they're buying. So now we've covered the co-founder claims, the messy timeline. Let's look at what is being promised about the product itself, not the backstory, the actual claims about what this shot does. Pure Genius Protein is marketed as a quick, convenient protein shot that you can take when you're busy, you're traveling, or you just need to hit your protein goal for the day. That part's totally fine. Convenience is a major selling point for so many people, especially when we're talking about supplements. But the language used in the promotion goes far beyond convenience. There are statements implying that the protein shot can help balance blood sugar, statements suggesting it can help regulate hunger, statements that imply it can support mood or even energy. While protein can absolutely support satiety and help people hit their daily intake, none of these things are unique to this product. Those benefits come from protein in general, not this specific formulation. Here's an easy way to understand that. Think of protein like tires on a car. Whether you buy them from Costco or another tire shop, the tires still do the same job. They help the car move forward or move at all. This protein shot is not a special type of protein. It's the same protein that you would find in any whey powder, just squeezed into a tiny bottle. This is also where my scope as a certified personal trainer and somebody that studies nutrition and is studying nutrition comes into play. I can talk about what protein does. I can talk about how protein supports recovery, satiety, and daily intake. What I can't do, obviously, is diagnose, treat, or make medical claims, which I would never do. And to be clear, neither can Mel Robbins. She doesn't have the credentials to back up any of this, period. So when the marketing contains language that hints at blood sugar support or energy regulation, I have questions. Not because protein is unsafe, but because these claims are being made by someone with no nutrition training. Now let's talk about the protein itself, because this is something Dr. Mike has been very vocal about. The original Genius shot used beta-lactoglobulin, which is a specific whey protein fraction that is naturally high in leucine. Leucine is the amino acid that signals your body to start muscle protein synthesis. But let's be clear. This does not make it a magical protein. It is still whey. The easiest way to picture this is to think of whey protein like a trail mix. Beta-lactoglobulin is like picking out all the M&Ms. You're concentrating one part of the mix. It doesn't turn into a different food. It's still whey. It's still the same amino acid profile. It's just a more concentrated fraction of the same source. Dr. Mike talked about this for years. It was his angle for why Genius Shot could fit so much protein into such a small bottle. But Pure Genius Protein did not invent this concept. It did not create a new protein. It is the same idea Genius Shot was already using, but you guessed it, rebranded. And yet the marketing hints at superior absorption or unique bioavailability. But bioavailability doesn't work like that. Bioavailability is like how fast a sponge absorbs water. All good sponges are going to absorb water, whether you pour the water from a cup or a bottle. It doesn't change the nature of the sponge. A protein shot does not suddenly become more absorbable just because the serving is smaller. Now let's talk about the addition of collagen, because this is where I feel like some people are getting confused. Pure Genius Protein includes collagen. Collagen is not a complete protein, although it is a protein. It does not trigger muscle protein synthesis. It doesn't have the amino acids needed for muscle repair. That is important to point out. Collagen is great for skin, nails, and possibly connective connective tissue, but it's not the same thing as complete whey protein. Here's an analogy that I hope helps explain it. A complete protein is like a full toolkit. It has every tool you need to build muscle. Collagen is like bringing only a screwdriver and a hammer. It's helpful, but it's not the whole set. Mixing whey with collagen is also like mixing orange juice with lemonade. I know that sounds terrible. Both are drinks, both hydrate you, but combining them does not create some kind of a super drink. It just creates a half OJ, half lemonade situation, which in my opinion sounds awful. Now, here is the evidence-based part that really matters. At least it matters to me, and I hope it does to you too. Most of the clinical research on collagen for skin elasticity, wrinkle depth, and joint comfort use 10 to 20 grams per day, consistently over 8 to 12 weeks. Pure Genius protein includes about 2.5 grams of collagen. There's no research showing that 2 to 3 grams of collagen does anything meaningful for skin, joints, hair, nails, or any of the beauty claims women are constantly being marketed. So if the dose is not enough to do much of anything, the obvious question for me becomes, why did they add it? Based on the calories listed, the collagen addition reduced the amount of whey while keeping the total protein number at 23 grams. That means the quality of the protein went down, not up. If your latte suddenly becomes half foam, the cup can still say 16 ounces. It's just not the same drink anymore. Now let's talk about who this product is being marketed to. Public data shows that Mel Robbins' audience is overwhelmingly women, especially ages 25 to 45. That's not private or speculative. It is standard demographic reporting from her podcast and her website. And collagen is one of the most aggressively marketed ingredients towards women. It is tied to beauty, skin, hair, nails, anti-aging, and wellness aesthetics. So yeah, I think it's fair to ask, was collagen added because it improves the formula or because it improves the marketing? I think we all know the answer to that. I also want to point out that this is not an accusation. It's just a realistic question based on the demographics and the tiny non-therapeutic dose of collagen. Ingredient choices in supplements are often made with the target customer in mind. So when a product suddenly includes a trendy, woman-focused type ingredient at a clinically meaningless dose, I think it's important to call that out. And people should definitely be questioning this. This is why claims matter. This is why language matters. When you market a product connected to health, the words you use shape how people understand what they're buying. And when the person making these claims has no nutrition training, that becomes misleading very quickly. If Pure Genius protein were marketed as a simple grab-and-go protein option, this chapter of this video wouldn't even exist. But the messaging leans into hunger, blood sugar, mood absorption, and energy in a way that suggests benefits far beyond what this formula can actually do, in my opinion. So now that we've covered the claims, the formulation, the collagen dosing, and her demographics on her social media, her podcast, and her website, it's time to talk about the bigger picture, why transparency matters and why consumers deserve better. I want to talk about something that a lot of supplement companies lean in on, and some people might find it impressive at first glance. But when you really take a closer look and slow down and pay attention, it kind of falls apart. I want to talk about the doctor panels. I want to talk about the scientific advisory board that they have that is full of doctors. Pure Genius Protein has been promoting that they have this panel of doctors. And like I have already said, to a lot of consumers, that sounds impressive, and it may even sound like medical oversight. It sounds like doctors sat down with the formula, reviewed the data, checked the science, and signed off on the product. In the wellness world, that is almost never what doctor panel usually means. In supplement marketing, a scientific advisory board is usually a group of paid advisors, professionals whose job is to lend their titles to the brand. They might consult, they might appear in videos, they might even give general opinions. That doesn't mean automatically that they designed the formula, they ran clinical trials, or even did independent scientific reviews of the products. Here is what makes this especially important in this case, in my opinion. If this product was originally developed as Genius Shot, complete with its protein fraction, serving size, and flavor system, then what exactly did the doctor panel co-develop with Mel Robbins? The core idea was already in place. The product was already being sold. The shot was not new. So when a doctor panel shows up only after a rebrand, a very fair question is, are these doctors here to shape the science, or are they here to make the marketing look more official? Here's what we can actually verify, and what I verified in my research for this video. Public coverage of the original Genius Shot lists Dr. Mike and his co-founder as the key figures associated with the brand. There is no public record of a formal doctor advisory board, a medical oversight group, or physician panel attached to Genius Shot during its run that I was able to find. Articles, archived pages, and industry write-ups from that period only mention Dr. Mike's involvement with his co-founder. There are no press releases introducing a panel. There's no Meet Our Medical Team page that I was able to find. No language about clinical oversight. So as far as public documentation goes, the doctor panel appears to be something that was introduced with the Pure Genius Protein rebrand, not something that existed from the Genius Shot days. That matters because if the panel was not there during the original development and early sales of the product, then their role is almost certainly part of the newer branding and narrative, not the original formulation process, in my opinion. That's not illegal by any means. It's just how this industry often works, unfortunately. Doctors are brought in to create the feeling of authority, especially when a non-medical influencer is being positioned as a co-founder. Their presence is a credibility badge, not necessarily an indicator of deep scientific involvement. If this panel had designed the formula from scratch or run studies or led clinical work, that would be shouted from the rooftops, as it should if that were the case. We would see the white papers, we would see the specific data, we would see clear claims about ratios and trials. And instead, what we have is vague talking points, missing ratio transparency, and a quiet rebrand that moved the product from one public figure to another. So when a doctor panel appears on a product that already existed under a different name, the better question is not, well, what amazing thing did these doctors build? But it should be, what story are these doctors being used to support? When a brand is marketing to an audience that already trusts a big name, attaching doctors to that brand layers on extra perceived safety. But perceived safety and scientific rigor are definitely not the same thing. This is why honesty matters here too. Consumers deserve to know whether a doctor panel is truly involved in product development or mainly involved in appearances and marketing. They deserve to understand the difference between symbolic oversight and actual scientific leadership. And they should know when medical titles are being used to strengthen a narrative instead of reflecting meaningful research. Now that we've walked through the product, the claims, the co-founder story, and the doctor panel, we need to talk about the bigger picture. Why does all of this matter even in the first place? Why am I even doing this video? Let's talk about it. Some people may think, it's just protein. Who cares? What's the big deal? And on its own, it's one supplement. Is it that serious? The bigger issue is not the liquid in the bottle. It's the pattern. It's the way that the story is being told. The wellness industry has a long track record of vague promises, recycled ideas, and influencers stretching the truth just enough to make a product sound life-changing. When someone with no nutrition credentials steps into the space and presents a product with a complicated backstory as if it were a clean, brand new creation, transparency stops being optional. It becomes the bare minimum. People deserve to know what they're buying. They deserve to know whether a product existed before under another name, whether the formula has changed, and what the ingredients are actually doing. In this case, the public story being told does not match the evidence that you can pull up in your internet browser. That disconnect is the entire point of this very chapter of this video. The marketing says brand new launch. The timeline says previous product with a makeover. Behind the scenes, both could be technically true, but the audience is only being handed one version. And this is where trust comes in. This is not about obsessing over perfection. It is about telling the truth. When somebody markets themselves as a co-founder, most people assume that they had a real role in building the thing. They assume early involvement, decision-making, and intention, like I've already mentioned multiple times. If your role was mostly promoting or you joined during a rebrand, that is what should be said. When people feel like information is being withheld or watered down, they lose trust, as they should. And in the wellness space, once that trust is gone, it's very hard to earn it back. We've seen this with celebrity supplements, multi-level marketing companies and their products, diet trends, and influencer partnerships. When the story doesn't line up with the receipts, people remember. The most concerning piece of this is not even the fact that there was a rebrand, because that's totally normal. Companies shift, they grow, and they change all the time. What stands out here to me is the lack of clarity around the timeline and the missing details about how much of the protein is coming from whey versus how much is coming from collagen. If you're going to call something science-driven, you really need to back that up with real transparency. Consumers should be able to see what the protein is made of, how much of it is complete protein, aka whey, whether collagen was added for function or marketing, whether the product is a true new build or a rebrand, and why the same type of claims survived under a new name. These are very basic questions, not deep dive level investigative work. People are tired. We are tired. Tired of being sold half stories, tired of influencer nutrition, tired of buzzwords taking the place of actual education. And when someone with a huge platform jumps into the space, the bar should be higher, not lower. Not because they're evil, but because influence comes with responsibility. This chapter is not about making her into a cartoon villain or anything like that. It really is about drawing a clear line between what's real and what is marketing. People deserve the facts, the context, and of course the honesty. They deserve to know when something is being framed as a brand new breakthrough when the paper trail says otherwise. Whether you were interested in trying this protein, skeptical about the launch, or just curious about the drama, you deserve clarity. This is exactly why deep dives like this exist. Not to drag just for fun, although I had a good time and I hope you did too, but to document, to compare timelines, and to give you the tools to make your own decisions instead of depending on influencer story time. With all of that being laid out, let's pull everything together and talk about what this means going forward. So now that we've talked about the entire story, compared products, walked through everything, looked at the formulation, connected the past to the present, I think we can talk about what this actually means. Not just for this bottle of protein, but for how we think about influencer wellness in general. Pure Genius protein is, in my opinion, not the most dangerous thing in the supplement aisle. It's a protein shot. The core problem is not the existence of the product, it's the story being built around it and the lack of transparency, as I've mentioned multiple times. When you tell millions of people that you co-founded a brand new protein product, but the record shows that product existed months prior under a different name with different people behind it, the public should absolutely question what is going on. This is not about expecting influencers to never make mistakes. It's about being honest with your audience. When your entire brand sells trust and storytelling, the last thing that you want is a story that feels like something is missing. And this one is missing some big pieces. It feels incomplete because it skips over the original version of the product. It feels incomplete because the formula quietly changed, but the number on the label stayed the same. It feels incomplete because collagen was added without a clear explanation. It feels incomplete because the timeline is framed as a year of development, but that doesn't match what the internet can easily verify. And it feels incomplete because the marketing language leans into benefits that go well beyond basic protein science, especially coming from somebody with, say it with me, no nutrition credentials. The reason this matters is pretty simple. Consumers deserve better. People are getting smarter. They're learning how to read labels. They're learning to question marketing. They are learning that co-founder can mean very different things behind closed doors. They're also learning that a rebrand isn't a scandal unless you pretend it never happened. If you want people to trust you, you have to tell them the whole story, not just the flattering part, not just the convenient version, the real version, the one that respects that your audience is paying attention. This is why I wanted to do this deep dive, not to freak out about protein, not to drag someone simply for entering the wellness space. Although I do think that Mel Robbins' content and her message and her past behavior drag her on its own, but that's just my opinion. It exists to hold a very popular, very influential person accountable for the way she is talking about a product that people are going to consume. That is reasonable. That's fair. And honestly, that should be the baseline for anyone launching a new supplement brand, along with transparency when it comes to the label. So what happens now? People obviously are going to make their own choices. Some are still going to choose to buy it because they like Mel Robbins and they enjoy her other content. Some are going to pass because the timeline doesn't sit right with them. And some are going to wait to see if the company answers questions like the ones we walked through today. All of it valid. Totally get it. You get to choose what you spend your money on. That's totally okay. But this conversation is about more than one bottle. This is about understanding that influencer wellness is not the same thing as evidence-based nutrition. It's not a substitute for expertise, and it's not a substitute for honesty. No matter how charismatic, relatable, or inspiring someone is, none of that excuses fuzzy claims or missing backstory when you are selling something connected to your health. If nothing else, I hope this breakdown helps you spot patterns more easily, ask better questions about timelines, look more closely at ingredient lists, and help protect yourself from marketing that sounds empowering but leaves out key facts. And for any companies watching this, and I know some of you will, let it be a reminder. Your audience is paying attention. People are smarter than you think. And if you don't tell the full story, somebody else will. And I'm happy to tell that here on my channel. I want to end this by saying something very clearly. This stuff gets to me. Not because I hate protein, not because I'm mad that someone launched a product, but because I see what happens on the other side of this kind of marketing. I work with real people as a personal trainer who are already overwhelmed, already confused, already feeling like they're failing at health. And then along comes another shortcut, another science-backed something or other with a half-told story and a shiny influencer face on it. It frustrates me because it doesn't have to be this way. You can tell people, hey, this is a rebrand. Hey, this existed before. Hey, I joined later as a partner. Hey, this is just a convenient way to get some protein in if that works for you. That's not hard. That is not a villain origin story. It's just being honest. And the fact that we keep getting these fuzzy timelines and carefully edited origin stories tells me that the marketing is being protected more than the consumer. It also hits me as someone who is actively studying this stuff. I stay in my lane. I'm a certified personal trainer. I'm studying nutrition and I'm very aware of what I can and cannot say. I have to be careful on purpose. So watching someone with no nutrition credentials skate right past that and speak with the level of authority about a product people drink every day feels wildly disrespectful, not to me personally, but to the people listening who think that they're getting neutral advice instead of a sales pitch. So if you're watching this and you feel a little angry or disappointed, or you're just plain tired, you're not overreacting. Your instincts are absolutely working, and you are allowed to expect better from people who make a living telling you how to live your life. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to walk away from products and people that do not feel honest, even if everyone on the internet is telling you that they are life-changing. I'm going to keep making videos like this. I'm going to keep pulling receipts and comparing timelines and putting things next to each other so that you can see the whole picture. Not because I enjoy drama for drama's sake or anything like that, but because you deserve information that isn't filtered through a marketing department first. If you found this helpful, if you would do me a favor, share it with someone who is feeling pressured to buy the thing, whatever that is, because a big name said for them to buy it. And if you're here watching, thinking, questioning, you're already doing more for your health than any protein shot ever could. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching. If you would, like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video out. And I'll see you guys on the next deep dive. Bye, everybody.